Welcome to a nourishing podcast. I am Mylène Notari and I help my clients build a personal and professional life that is nourishing, joyful, and deeply vibrant. Here we talk about new ways of living, being bold, think, and act out of the box to stimulate the life that lies within each of us. Hi everyone, I'm so happy today to welcome Kendra from Costa Rica. Hi Kendra.
Hello, Melanie. Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. We met from a few months ago in Uvita, so Costa Rica, and in fact had my neck which was totally blocked, and a friend of mine knew you. So then I did the link and I called you and you just had a spot for me, and it was so relieving because you're a chiropractor. And so can you explain what you do, why you're in Costa Rica right now? And yes, let's start from here.
Yeah, sure. That's a big question in itself. So I've been living in Costa Rica for just over 2 years now. And there's a few reasons of why I moved. It was in the middle of the pandemic that I moved. I was also sick of, being in that busy kind of modern hectic lifestyle. And I was actually coming down to move to Costa Rica with a partner and build a house and start a yoga and meditation program. But there's something very special about the jungle here, and all people who live here, like the expat kind of foreigner community, all make a little joke is like whatever you expect to happen in your life, the jungle will eat it up and give you something different. So in the past 2 years that I've been here, I now have my own clinic in my house. And that is where we met. And that is where people generally come to see me. I also work in the town of Uvita, but my main way of working is my background is actually, I have a science degree and I worked in athletics and athletic therapy that as my beginning 10 years ago. But I've kind of slowly refined and tinkered and explored other ways of working with people because I found the general way of working with people, like the Western medical model or working very narrow-minded or getting fixated on a single problem, doesn't really give people the holistic healing that they're looking for. Most people, when they're trying to change their life or change pain in their body or approach a different way of thinking or eat differently, you can't just do it with the one specific modality. It's kind of everything has to slowly unravel and build something new. And there's lots of unlearning and relearning that goes on, which I think is a big part of what people enjoy working together, because I really explain stuff really clearly. So when I work with people, I help them understand their body, essentially. I help people get where things could be coming from. I use a neurological modality that's really powerful, but I also make sure that people feel like human beings and that they're listened to and that they're not alone and that there's ways out of everything. I try to really get the message across that everything in the body is workable as long as we are aware of it and we want to work with it. Then everything becomes an opportunity to evolve and transform and change. So when you came in my office, it's like a very common presentation. I work in an area that's very athletic. There's lots of surfers, there's lots of movers, there's lots of travelers. There's a lot of kind of in and out transient style to this area. There's more and more people living here and building families and going to school. But people will call me and be like, I have this problem. What do I do? How do I get out? How do I fix this? And I slowly have to walk them in a way of understanding, this could be coming from a really long time ago. You and I had deep discussions about the way that you move, as a dancer in the past and how that can affect and stressful lifestyles. And we kind of got into diet and I learned all about the way that you eat. And that's kind of how I approach it. Because like I said, not one thing will change, especially when things are becoming chronic or you have chronic stress or chronic problems in your body. It's not one specific modality that's going to shift and change your world. So that is a little intro to how I work. There's probably lots more to chat about, but yeah, essentially I help people really understand their bodies and then embody that change and be their kind of support and guide through the process, through nervous system work, movement, and just, yeah, like human contact, being humans together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was really impressed by your techniques. You talk about something neurological. And I never experienced that with someone else. So could you explain it a bit more? Because it was really life-changing for me to have this approach also.
Yeah. So back when I learned this nervous system technique, it was almost 10 years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago now. And back then, nervous system stuff wasn't really so cool. Now we talk a lot about nervous system regulation and how to, experience the parasympathetic state and using breathing techniques and all sorts of other techniques to kind of downgrade or regulate your nervous system. But I would travel once a month to California from Canada. At that time, I lived in Edmonton. So I'd pop over once a month and I learned from a medical doctor. His name's Dr. Jose Palomar. And he has uncovered a technique, a technology called the short term. I always make a joke. It's a medical doctor who made this term. So it's very long winded, but the short abbreviation is PDTR. And the long wind of that is proprioceptive deep tendon reflex. So the proprioceptive part is you're working with proprioceptors on the body. So your body is a huge sense organ. We have the five senses, of course, but you have receptors in your skin and your organs at every layer of your physical body, and they're picking up stimulus of all different types. And so we're working with those receptors, pain receptors, tension receptors, pressure, all sorts of things. And we are finding the ways to resolve these receptors that have kind of gone, in my imagination, I'm flashing my fingers like a red flashing light. And when these receptors are stressed or kind of stuck in a specific state, I imagine them to be blinking like a red kind of traffic light. And so I go and I find these receptors that are dysfunctional and kind of stuck in this state, and then bring them back to what they should be doing, which is just picking up stimulus. And by doing this, I'm setting the correction in by hitting a deep tendon reflex, which is the second part of the term. And that puts a signal immediately into your spinal cord, and it opens up those receptors and kind of immediately unclogs or unblocks them from going mayday, mayday, mayday to just open and receiving. Yeah, that's kind of like my mind is very creative. Like when I'm talking to people, I get all of this information and I'm actually thinking in the world of receptors. Like when people slip, I'm thinking about impact forces. When people have like digestive things, I'm thinking about pressure or like tension based receptors. So I'm very much in a different kind of detective world. And this work, no matter how old things are, which is why it's incredibly healing, is whether you've had something, a week ago or yesterday, or it's been decades. I always tell people, please start telling me your life story. If you have something significant from your own birth, please start there and let's go as far as we can, as much as we can get, because these things can get literally congested and stuck in your nervous system, and then they will slowly create more and more compensation, less and less nervous system efficiency, and really bog down major systems in the body, like your digestive, your mental health, the way that you move, so physical movement and the pain that it creates in the body. It's a very, very profound modality. The stuff that I have witnessed people do, like the change that they have experienced, it is like nothing short than miraculous, because the body just needs that input to change, and it just immediately starts to rewire the nervous system into something more natural, which is its most efficient state. So that's what we did together. I include it in all of my treatments with my clients, and it's, like I said, it's very, very, very healing.
Yeah, I remember like when you watched me the first time, you knew I was a dancer before about ballet, yeah. And then I was starting to do some Pilates, and for me it was just all about movement, but then you told me it's very straight, and that I was still holding my body in something very straight, and just to add some more movement, more flow to my body would be better. I remember you asked me like things about my body, like on my knee. Did I had a trauma on my knee or things like that? And I was like, okay, this is impressive, because it was all about you touching and feeling also my body. And yeah, I'm sure, and I know some results you had. It's like a very miraculous technique. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And just the point on the Pilates, because I know Pilates is very popular, and it brings about like a really valuable kind of concept that I like to tell people about. And this is like kind of like a extension onto the way that I think about the body. It's not necessarily the nervous system work, but it is kind of part of the way that I help people resolve whatever it is they're going through. And it's Pilates, but it's also like this postural thing that we get all excited about in the world. And Pilates and a lot of our really basic fundamental ideas around postural like placement is all very rigid. Like we specifically Pilates, not to knock on Pilates in any way, but just to kind of help like bring this concept to life. The top of the head from the pelvic floor, like this whole torso area, it doesn't really move very much in Pilates. And we have this very stable, solid core, like torso that we're building, and we move our limbs off of that. But my problem with Pilates, or my little bone to pick with any type of modality that has that kind of thought process, is that as soon as you walk up the stairs, you lose that rigid, stable spine. Or as soon as you get in your car, or as soon as you have to go to the bathroom in the morning, there's all of these different functional positions that actually require full movement through the spine. And the spine, I don't think should be held stuck, because when you hold, like women, for example, we hold our tummy, and like dancers especially, we love to hold and guard our tummy. But it's not just a dancer thing. It's like a woman. It's an unfortunate normal that we all hold our bellies and like kind of guard against, how we feel about ourselves. And that can limit digestion. Like it kind of promotes this stagnation in the digestive tract, because every time we breathe, we should be pushing our breath down. I say that we should be giving a little organ massage with every breath. And all of these kind of rigid practices don't really apply. So when you leave your rigid world, like say you trip, or you take up tennis, or you go snowboarding, or anything where you leave this kind of stable, rigid center, those efforts don't necessarily translate very well. And I've experienced, and other people that have come into my office notice, that when they adopt that rigid way of being, like holding yourself in a posture, whatever that posture is, something that we think is good posture, when we leave that world, we're more prone to injury. We get more back pain, we get more neck stuff. We're much more prone to anxiety, because our energy actually doesn't get the opportunity to like descend. And so we get this like tight kind of held thing, and all of our energy kind of sticks around in our brain, like in our head. And as we all know, we're all prone in this modern world to like spinning and thinking and ruminating and, all the stuff that we can get really, stuck on. Just breathing and moving your spine through the 3-dimension, 6 different positions can be really, really helpful and really nourishing to people's bodies, for their joint health, for their energy, for the way that they move, for the way that they just like live their daily life. So it's a huge topic. Like when I saw you, Melanie, I think we had 2 sessions.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to like try to just like give you as much as I can in 2 sessions, but really I try to slowly like unwind these concepts, because it kind of starts to unravel a lot of things that we've thought were healthy normals. And there's a lot of stuff that we do in our culture that are not necessarily healthy, but they're normal. And so one of the things that I emphasize with people, like you were saying, is just get your spine moving in all directions. Like let it move, breathe down there, feel your body. It's so powerful, and can be done in very simple ways, like nothing complicated, or nothing where you need to sit down or do something for half an hour, 60 minutes a day. It can be very simple.
Yeah. And also remember that when I saw you, so it was, I guess, in May, just before leaving Costa Rica. So I had lots of treatments on my teeth at that time. And you are talking about the spine, and it's for sure that when we talk about the body, a chiropractor, we always think about the spine. But also you're working on this old small area where I had some trauma. And it was super relieving for me because it was a bit inflamed and I couldn't eat everywhere in my mouth. And now I can. So this is amazing.
Yay, good.
But yeah, but I just want to say also that you are working also on very specific things and you feel all the specific areas that they need some relieving and also in the big areas, but also in very specific ones.
Yeah, because I worked in the nervous system for a significant amount of time, like I have been working in this field for 10 years now, and some periods of that 10 years were highly concentrated. I worked in a medical doctor's office in the middle of nowhere, Canada, like just in the farm fields where there's like just farmers and reserve land. It was a very interesting time because I had 8 clients a day, and I would work 4 days on and have 1 day off. And then I would do that for chunks of time. Like I'd do it for 8 weeks and I would do it for 12 weeks. And I was only allowed to see people twice because I was so full. People were traveling from all over Canada, and I was only allowed to see people for that small amount of time. And so I started to watch patterns that people have. Because the farm fields of Canada and any farmland, farming is really hard on the body. Like it's high stress. There's a lot of heavy machinery. You're dealing with animals like horses and cows and things that I saw and heard that were phenomenally shocking what the human body can sustain. But I started to recognize that there's high priority areas in the nervous system. So particularly things like stitches or cuts or any kind of like trauma, like surgeries to your spine. So anywhere from the top of your head to your pelvic floor will weigh very heavily on how your body is functioning, because that whole section of your body that we call our core or our torso, it houses all of our important organs. And the most important one for a functioning human being is our brain. We need it. And so the nervous system will put a great emphasis on trying to protect that area. So if you've had stitches to the head or dental work, like significant dental work, it hits to the head. I've had some crazy cool stories of people. One comes to mind. He was a man, and he lived in LA, and he was like in his early 60s, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it was in this kind of early stage where people were like, do you really have Parkinson's? Because that whole diagnosis process can be very challenging. There's a lot of like gray areas on, is this real Parkinson's or what is, what's actually going on? And so I had a conversation with this person who was like losing his speech, but he didn't have some of the other Parkinson's symptomology. And anyways, he had told me a story of he fell down the stairs and hit his face. Like he hit his forehead square on like the journey down the stairwell. And he said, since then, I've never been the same. And 2 years later, he had a Parkinson's diagnosis. And so I'm listening to this story. Like people will call me a detective work, but I'm not really that fancy of a detective. I just ask good questions and listen and feel. So we did work on the hit to his head, and he got up and he could walk better. He could hear better. He could speak better. He was like more present. Like he's like, oh, everything just got turned way up. Like all my senses are up. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. And you just have to sit with those kind of situations and be like, well, is this person have a real Parkinson's diagnosis, or is their nervous system just running so low? Like it's being so dragged. It's super inefficient. Everything's going downhill. And like, this is the manifestation of these symptoms, get a label, whatever that label is. In this example, it's Parkinson's, but it's very common. And so, yeah, dental stuff has huge roles. I've noticed that there's links between people getting shingles and dental work. People will have dental surgery, and then shortly after, 3 to 12 months later, they'll have an outburst of shingles for the first time, which is an extremely painful neurological experience that can go on and on and on, depending on the person and how they manage it. So, yeah, teeth are no joke. And like the amount that we're using our mouth and jaw, as far as like talking and eating and breathing, it's like essential for human life.
Yeah.
Like literally, like it needs to be well functioning. And so when you have these kind of, albeit sometimes very necessary invasive surgeries, we need to think about how we can actually rehab that properly. But there's not a lot of resources or even a lot of thinking around that. It's very normal to get dental work, or you break a bone and you get the cast off, or whatever the thing. When you get that practice or that treatment done, it's kind of over. You're like, okay, I'm good. But it's
Not really.
it's not
And
true,
then we own the
unfortunately.
Kendra around us.
Yeah, exactly. You just need to like be thinking like, of course this is happening. Like, of course I'm having like neck things, or I'm having whatever the problem is. Of course I am, because I just had this surgery or this incident happen to me, and I've played it off as insignificant, but it's super significant, and we're kind of prone to just getting on with life as well, which is a whole other problem. But yeah, just thinking about your body and your history, and like really thinking about the things that you've been through as a human being, and like the timeline of things, like when symptoms happen and what has immediately happened before that. I wish I could be everybody's little, little bird to like tell them like, you should look at this.
But
But it
would be
actually
so
is,
perfect.
yeah, I'll sell those on Amazon. Yeah, but really, you can do a lot of it on your own. You just need to sit down, and a lot of times you have to sit down with uncomfortable moments and be like, yeah, that part of my life kind of sucked. And why, like, how could that still be in my body?
And you were, so when I saw you, you told me like it would be interesting to like doing some monitoring about myself, how I feel today, and if
Yeah.
I eat this, how I feel, etc., etc. And I think that this is an example of how we can just deal with ourselves and just ourselves. We don't need someone else at some point, but we don't take this time, just to take 5 minutes of notes about how we felt today or something like this, or after dinner, after eating, after some movement. And I think this is very interesting to just have a journal and to start something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important. I call them growth markers, and it's just ways that you can monitor your own growth, like what is going on. And it's really simple. Sometimes people find it to be time consuming and a little bit annoying at first, because people are generally we're very detached from our body. And like I say to a lot of people, there's really good reasons, like valid reasons for which we have been detached and like pulled away from our body, which is totally fair and okay. But the journey still needs to eventually, you still need to turn the light and start walking back towards yourself and getting in touch whenever that happens for the person. Unfortunately, it usually happens when people are in pain or they're struggling in some way. That's like what usually brings a moment of like, oh, I'm not okay. What do I do here? But you can monitor things, all sorts of things very easily. And I always tell people that the quickest way you can impact your own health, that you can monitor really quickly, is by watching what you eat and how you move. And you can easily just check in on your bowel movements, your energy, physical pain in your body, your mood, like how you're, maybe more reactive, or you're able to like, just sit back and be a little bit more calm, or you're feeling erratic. Like there's all these ways that you can touch into yourself that if you practice, it doesn't take more than a few minutes a day. And it's a way for you to like tap in and keep a pulse on your life and like on the rhythm of what you're doing. Because a lot of people, when they come in to see me, they've usually tried, the New York Times bestseller diet, like whatever cool thing is going on, and they're applying a protocol, and they're like, well, it says that it works. And I'm like, well, does it work? Do you feel better? And a lot of people can't even really answer that, which I find mind blowing. So the journey is to actually get that answer. Like, is it helpful for you? And if it is, awesome. If it isn't, ditch it and start building a relationship with yourself where okay, I can and cannot eat this, or I feel really bad if I hop off my diet, or if I stop moving, or whatever your sequence of events that need to go on in your day or in your week. That's what you need for you. And you is a fluctuating thing. You are in flux. That's the beauty of living in the jungle, is you see how quickly nature is always building up and breaking down. And we need to remind ourselves that we are also continually in that state. And that also is a really powerful thing to remember and keep, because a program that you were doing 10 years ago may not be suitable for you today. And that's something that we also get kind of stuck on.
And as you said, I think the problem is not like the new protocol by the best-selling on New York Times or a new book, etc., etc. It's just putting awareness, trying it, and then just feel it in our body, and then our mind, etc., etc. Just monitor, because, as you said, often people are applying things, but without awareness. So when you ask them, okay, does it work for you? I guess so. Often the answer is like, I guess so, but it's not like a real feeling. So thank you for talking about that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And if you can get to that place where you feel it, like you know it, that this diet or this exercise regime is working for you, you're going to keep doing it. But if you don't, if you have that feeling of like, ooh, I don't know, it's just, it's in a matter of time, you'll just be on to the next, because you really don't have a connection with what is happening in your body. So I would just tell everybody to check out your bowel movements, check out your poops, feel your energy when you wake up out of bed, feel your energy midday, feel what kind of movements your body needs. Remember, if you're a woman, that you are not a constant energy of stabilization. We have this flow that we need to tap into, tapering things down, revving things up, depending on where you are in your cycle or just in your life. Like if you're moving house or getting married, you need to do all of these different things to make sure that you are managing your energy and your health appropriately.
Exactly. And so I really like your holistic approach. So we are talking about eating, diet and movement. And I would like to ask you, because the name of this podcast is in French, nourrissant, so nourishing in English. What nourishes you every day?
Yeah, good question. I get great nourishment out of being out in nature. The nature here is, so I'm from the middle of Canada, and it is a very hot, but also a very cold, and predominantly cold. Everybody, makes fun of Canada for being cold. It is. And there's this beautiful things that happen in Canada where there's seasons, but essentially it was just not the lifestyle. I didn't feel like I could live in nature with it being so chilly. I wasn't like a winter sport person or anything like that. So when I got to the jungle and it's so in your face, like you remember, it's raw and wild, vibrant, it's loud. I was just traveling in Canada because my sister got married and I got back a couple weeks ago. And I just remember the sound of once it hits 5 a.m., it's everything comes to life. Life, you cannot get away from this vibrancy of life. And it's this thing that is constantly in your face. And it's not just about that heightened moment of everything in full bloom. Lots of stuff is, dying. There's caimans just down my road. You just see this cycle of life. And you are very much what I love about being here is that I'm always reminded is that humans are not on the top of the food chain. Mother Nature will always give you a crazy rainstorm when you're I don't think I can get home. And so these are all really important things that I think keep me really nourished and like really in tune with the reality of the situation that we often lose. When I lived in Montreal for 6 years, which is a very big, I used to call it the concrete jungle. I lived in like downtown Montreal, which is awesome to be a place to be in your 20s, but they're very opposing. You can get very stuck and like boxed into that like reality, and you lose sight of what's actually going on. And just yesterday I went free diving with the woman who was our introduction.
Yeah,
And
Charlene.
I went, yeah, Charlene and her boyfriend Sylvain, and we went free diving and we saw these whales because it's whale season here. And you're just kind of put back and you sit back and you're like, whatever I'm thinking about in my brain is important is so unimportant. It's like we get stuck on these silly little things in our like human, existence. And it's just so not worth it. So that is the most nourishing thing. And luckily it doesn't require a lot of effort. I can just sit on my balcony and soak up some sun and listen to all the animals, or I can just get on the boat. We exited to go free diving just from the beach. That's a 4-minute walk from my house. So I'm very lucky for that. I eat food and fruit that I would have never eaten in Canada, like the craziest exotic fruits. All of this just keeps me kind of in tune to that there's a rhythm to life, and to not grab and squeeze onto stuff too much, because that is, I think, one of the perpetuating things of sickness and like dis-ease in the modern society.
Yeah. And so the title of this English series on my podcast is I Choose My Life Now. What is the biggest choice you made in the past? Or maybe you're doing right now, but I don't know.
Yeah, I went through my own, I guess you could call it, health crisis in 2015 and 2016, where I was basically ignoring my body completely. I have a similar background to Melanie, just like a hardcore ballerina, which you're forced to think about your body in a certain way. And that goes in really quite deeply, mixed with other circumstances in my life. And like, I just got to this point at the end of 2016 where I was just so unwell. Like I couldn't really eat food. I was allergic to everything. I had so much pain in my body, and my cycle was pretty much gone because I had been on hormonal contraceptive, like the pill. At that point, I was just on the pill for like a decade. I was a big mess. Like I was in a marriage that I was like not a marriage. It was crumbling. The only thing that I had going for me was I had this really thriving clinical practice doing what I do, and so I just dumped all my energy into that drive. But as we all know, if any women or men who are listening to this who are overachievers, we all know that doesn't work. You can't work, and hope that your life is going to be okay. I tried. It doesn't work. So at that point, I started to say like no to a bunch of things and started to say yes to myself, which was like really foreign and really uncomfortable. And now, however many years later that is, like 8 or so years later, the big things that I say yes to myself is just trying to figure out what life is like being just a completely autonomous single woman in the world, learning all the little tricks of the trade of how to be financially stable, but also just enjoying quiet time alone, and, knowing how to get my car fixed. Like all of these things are just like really important to me right now, to put myself in a position where I feel really in control of my life, because there's been many situations throughout my adult life where I thought I was in control of it, but I was completely not in control of it. And so those are my yeses. And actually my big yes right now is I've spent quite a bit of time in the in-person space working. I worked a lot with the people who come and see me in my home. And I'm about to go out back into the online space, which I haven't been doing. Yeah.
Great.
Haven't been doing since the pandemic. Yeah. And I have a great love for working with people who have scar tissue on their body. And I've been particularly working with women who have scar tissue on their breasts from whatever. It could be an implant surgery, explant surgery, which is what they call it when you remove your breast implants. It could be from cancer, like mastectomy, breast reduction, breast reconstruction, lumpectomy, any type of breast scarring that you have. I'm starting to create a app and a kind of program for women who are at whatever phase, the pre-surgery, the kind of like healing in the immediately after surgery, as well as this kind of post-surgery integration place where it could be anywhere to, 2 or so months after surgery, but actually you can work on your own health and scars, even if you've had the surgery decades and decades ago, which is where the nervous system work and all that comes in. So this is my little baby. It's like 10 years of work that I'm starting to like package and condense into a shape that can be pushed into the online space. So
this is amazing. Well done.
Yeah. I'm like a little hesitant because I don't love the online space because I love human contact. I think there's great power in like touch and like being in front of somebody. But I know that there's so many women out there who need it, and there's so many people who need support and feel like somebody's understanding what they're going through. So I'm doing it. I'm going for it.
Wow. This is a big yes again.
Yeah, it's a big yes. It's a big yes. I've been sitting on the idea for almost 2 years, and finally I'm at the point. I've had a couple women who've had their breast implants removed who've come to see me, like they've traveled to come to see me, and they've both said something similar, which is like, Kendra, you can't just sit in your office and do this one by one. You gotta bring it out.
Yes, there are many women who need that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. So that is in process of coming to light. I'm gonna kind of in the final stages of it.
Amazing, great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for this talk. It was super interesting and deep and very also like I think many people just discovered your technique, which is not so well known and which is pretty amazing too. So I'm very happy to make the space for you to talk about this, because I think it can really change the life of many people in the world. So if you're going online, then it can help like all around the world.
Yes, exactly. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to see you in online space. And thank you for letting me just share this with your community. I love being able to talk about all of these things, because I think people get really stuck in a feeling that they're alone and they can't get help. And in my experience, that's just the exact opposite, is that people can make changes no matter where they are or what's going on. They just need that little bit of drive. That can be fear. It's like all freaked out about it, but they just need that little piece, and that can be the thing that pushes them forward into something really amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. So of course I will put all your details in the description of the podcast, so that the people just can find you also if you're in Costa Rica or not, but just to make the link. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I hope I will see you back in Costa Rica in real one day.
Yes, please. I am waiting. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you liked it and feel inspired, I invite you to share it with your family and friends. To support this podcast, you can give it 5 stars, comment, and add it in your favorites. There are more episodes in English to come on the 3rd Friday of each month. Bye!